April 10, 2012. The South China Sea was calm, but tensions simmered beneath the surface. The BRP Gregorio del Pilar, on patrol, detected Chinese fishing boats inside Scarborough Shoal. The boats carried illegally collected coral, clams, and live sharks. The Philippine Navy prepared to board, but two Chinese surveillance ships appeared. They blocked the warship, turning a routine patrol into a tense standoff. The quiet lagoon became the epicenter of a geopolitical showdown. The world watched as a long-simmering dispute threatened to erupt. On one side of this confrontation was the BRP Gregorio del Pilar. It was the flagship of the Philippine Navy, a symbol of national pride. On board was a crew of professional sailors and officers, sworn to uphold the laws of their country. Facing them was a rapidly growing fleet of Chinese vessels. What started with 8 fishing boats and 2 surveillance ships soon multiplied. At the peak of the standoff, the lone Philippine ship found itself facing a staggering 22 Chinese vessels. This fleet was a mix of government patrol ships and fishing boats, all seemingly coordinated. The disparity was stark and visually dramatic. The Gregorio del Pilar was a capable warship, but it was overwhelmingly outnumbered. The Chinese strategy was clear. They were using what some analysts call cabbage tactics. They surround a target with multiple layers of vessels, making it impossible for the opponent to move or act without escalating the situation. The two sides represented more than just ships on the water. They represented two vastly different powers. The world watched as these two forces faced off, wondering if the standoff would remain a tense stalemate or erupt into something far more dangerous. So, what is this place that sparked such a major international incident? Scarborough Shoal is not an island you can live on. It is a triangular chain of reefs and rocks surrounding a large lagoon. Its proximity to the Philippines is a key part of the country's claim. For generations, Filipino fishermen have sailed to the shoal's rich fishing grounds. The shoal's importance goes far beyond fishing. Its location is strategically critical. It sits right alongside major international shipping lanes, where trillions of dollars in global trade pass every year. Any country that controls Scarborough Shoal has a significant vantage point over this vital economic artery. For military planners, the shoal is a prime piece of real estate. Furthermore, the seabed around Scarborough Shoal is believed to hold vast, untapped reserves of oil and natural gas. The potential for immense wealth lying beneath the waves adds another layer of complexity to the dispute. Because of these factors, fishing, strategic location, and potential resources, Scarborough Shoal is much more than just a collection of rocks. It is a symbol of sovereignty and national identity. The shoal itself is small, but the principles and interests at stake are enormous. The presence of both Philippine and Chinese ships at Scarborough Shoal was no accident. The Philippines bases its claim on international law, specifically the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, or UNCLOS. According to UNCLOS, a country has an exclusive economic zone that extends 200 nautical miles from its shores. Scarborough Shoal lies well within the Philippines' 200 nautical mile EEZ. China, on the other hand, makes a very different argument. Its claim is based on history. Beijing points to ancient maps and historical records that, it says, prove Chinese sailors discovered and used the shoal centuries ago. The immediate reason for the standoff in April 2012 was the enforcement of Philippine law. The Gregorio del Pilar was responding to a clear case of poaching and environmental destruction by Chinese fishing vessels. For China, the intervention of their surveillance ships was also a matter of principle. Both sides believed they were in the right, and both were acting to defend what they saw as their legitimate national interests. As the Chinese surveillance ships blocked the mouth of the lagoon, the situation on the water became incredibly tense. The BRP Gregorio del Pilar, a warship armed with cannons, was now in a direct face-off with non-military Chinese vessels. The Filipino commander faced a difficult choice. Firing on the Chinese ships would be a massive escalation, an act of war. But backing down would mean failing in his mission and allowing the poachers to escape. The air must have been thick with tension as the captains of the vessels communicated over the radio, each side demanding the other leave the area immediately. The days that followed turned into a slow, nerve-wracking dance. The ships held their positions, sometimes just a few hundred meters apart. It was a test of endurance and resolve. More ships from both sides arrived, though the Chinese fleet always vastly outnumbered the Philippine presence. Diplomatic channels between Manila and Beijing were buzzing with activity, but on the water, the stalemate continued. The crews on the ships were on high alert, 24 hours a day. They watched each other through binoculars, monitoring every movement. This was not a battle of weapons, but a battle of wills. The world watched this maritime drama unfold, a modern-day siege happening on the high seas. Imagine being a sailor on the BRP Gregorio del Pilar during those weeks. Your home is a steel ship, surrounded by vessels from a foreign power. The daily routine would have been filled with an undercurrent of constant anxiety. Every watch on the bridge, every scan of the radar screen, would have been charged with importance. The commander of the Gregorio del Pilar carried the heaviest burden. He was in constant communication with naval headquarters in Manila, receiving orders and reporting on the fluid situation. The psychological pressure on the crew must have been immense. Despite the pressure, the crew of the Gregorio del Pilar held their ground. They represented the resolve of their nation. They did not fire their weapons. Their actions during the standoff were a testament to their training and their commitment to their duty. In the Philippines, the standoff at Scarborough Shoal ignited a firestorm of patriotic sentiment. News channels provided round-the-clock coverage. Across the country, people were talking about Panatag Shoal. There were public rallies and protests outside the Chinese embassy. Filipinos on social media organized campaigns calling for a boycott of Chinese products. In Beijing, the official response was firm and unwavering. The Chinese government accused the Philippines of harassing its fishermen. State-controlled media portrayed China as the victim, acting defensively to protect its territory. The international community watched the standoff with growing concern. The United States, a treaty ally of the Philippines, found itself in a delicate position. Washington called for a peaceful resolution and freedom of navigation. Other nations in the region watched nervously. The events at Scarborough Shoal were a clear signal of how Beijing might handle future disputes. The Philippines sought to bring the issue to international forums, arguing for a solution based on international law. The world was watching, but for the Philippines it felt like they were largely on their own. After nearly 2 months of tense stalemate, a breakthrough seemed to appear. Through back-channel negotiations, reportedly mediated by the United States, an agreement was reached for both sides to withdraw their ships from the shoal simultaneously. The Philippines, trusting in the diplomatic process, decided to honor the agreement. In mid-June 2012, the Philippine government ordered its remaining vessel to pull back from the shoal. However, the mutual withdrawal never happened. The Philippines withdrew its ship, but China did not. Instead of leaving, Chinese vessels remained. They solidified their presence, effectively taking de facto control of Scarborough Shoal. The Chinese ships blocked the entrance to the lagoon, preventing any other vessels from entering. The standoff had ended not with a bang, but with a quiet and decisive shift in control. For the Philippines, the outcome was a bitter pill to swallow. The government faced criticism at home for what many saw as a strategic blunder. Filipino fishermen who had depended on the shoal for their livelihood were now barred from their traditional fishing grounds. The end of the standoff marked a significant turning point in the South China Sea dispute. China had successfully altered the status quo without firing a shot. Today, more than a decade after the 2012 standoff, China remains in firm control of Scarborough Shoal. Chinese Coast Guard and maritime militia vessels maintain a constant presence. For the Philippines, the shoal remains a painful symbol of a national loss and an ongoing challenge. Filipino fishermen are still routinely blocked from entering the lagoon. The situation is a constant source of tension, a wound that has never fully healed. In 2013, the Philippines took a bold step. It filed a legal case against China at the Permanent Court of Arbitration in The Hague. In a landmark ruling in 2016, the tribunal sided overwhelmingly with the Philippines. However, China rejected the ruling, refusing to recognize or participate in the arbitration. The ruling was a moral and legal victory for the Philippines, but it had no enforcement mechanism. The story of Scarborough Shoal continues to be a central issue in Philippine politics and foreign policy. The Philippine Coast Guard and Navy continue to patrol the waters near the shoal. These incidents serve as constant reminders of the unresolved dispute. The 2012 standoff at Scarborough Shoal was more than just a maritime incident. It was a defining moment that reshaped the geopolitical landscape of the South China Sea.